All right, welcome everyone to our Phi Epsilon Kappa fraternity webinar. My name is Dr. David Lorenzi, and I'm the executive director of the Phi Epsilon Kappa fraternity. And we have with us this evening Dr. Daniel Burt. Dr. Burt is a professor and chair in the Department of Health and Kinesiology at Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and he's currently serving the fraternity as our president. And he's going to be speaking with us today on the topic of artificial intelligence. So, Dr. Burke, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you. I'll share my screen in a minute, but this will mostly be a practical demonstration of some of the things that AI can or can't do in the classroom, a little bit of the discussion on those issues. Before we do that, since this is both for faculty and students, it is kind of talking about what is the purpose of AI when it comes to education. And I'm going to be honest with you, we haven't fully figured out how to answer that question. We have things that we know it benefits us in. It can absolutely improve workload flow. It can absolutely make more efficiencies. Concerns do exist because if we become more efficient, a lot of places that means you get more work. That's a discussion I have with my students currently. I let my students use AI a lot of times to respond back and work with their assignments. But some of the assignments have gotten significantly more complicated and bigger because I know they're going to leverage the work. And then what are we grading afterwards also kind of becomes the discussion. Um, for a lot of what we use AI for in the classroom right now, when we look at K through 12, we're seeing it really just kind of like YouTube and other things like that, just supplement the learning, or in some cases take over the learning, which is a different concern. But I will stress, like for us, it really pushes the boundary of higher education. Like if you are used to just being a content provider where you just give the information and that's it, that's always been able to be surpassable by students when they could just take the syllabi, go buy the books, read it, regardless of the degree, know the information, they're good to go. However, as information has become more readily available, the internet became better at, doing things like having search engines. Then what has ended up happening is you end up having these kind of clean, easily built ways to get information you need very specifically. What's changed is with the advent of AI is now that information gets all pulled together. And so where it used to be a student or faculty member had to go look up different topics and articles and things through the internet, and they could find them, pulling it all together had to rely on the individual to do the critical thinking and analysis and develop themes and so forth. AI does that for us now. The question is, does it do it right or not? AI typically can do things extremely well if you know how to ask it to do things extremely well. AI does not do things extremely well if you're just like, figure it out. And the AI is like, I don't know what you're asking. And so what ends up happening is we get kind of lost on how this looks. And a lot of times AI gets treated by both educators and students as like a hyper Google, as opposed to how Google's actually using their AI. And if you watch any of the commercial or business things, they are building basically where AI can take over jobs very easily and be far more efficient at getting things done. Whether that's the best thing or not, separate discussion. But we're seeing it as like the new release of agent chatbots happen, where essentially a digital agent that's an AI will go in and take the role of a director at a location. And essentially, it doesn't sleep, it never gets tired. It's constantly processing more efficiency ways to do things, more effective ways to do things in a business, whether it be for marketing, whether it be for management. I've got a friend who runs a business. He does not have employees anymore. It's a six-figure business, but he has five AI chatbots running different parts of the business, one in logistics, one in marketing, and they're producing ideas, coming up with things, and he kind of makes the final decision on those things and turns it around. So what we're going to do though is just kind of talk about the classroom. I'm talking about things that both students and faculty can use to make things more effective. But I'm going to be honest with you, when I do this with my class, I don't have the same expectations I did anymore. What shifted was if we're doing, say, a formula, I'm no longer looking for you to get the correct answer because AI doesn't get it wrong. Once you show AI what you want it to do, it always gets the formula correct once you train it to do so. I think that's the thing that people forget is like the first time you type something into AI to ask it to do, that is not the final thing you're looking for. You have to usually continue to prompt it. A lot of times they're going to need you to refine it. You may need to give an example, but once you do those things, it will continue to refine, improve those items. And so for me, I don't let it take over everything. I'm not going to lie. Like my major assignments, I usually don't have AI design all my big assignments. I still do those. I may have it reformat it so it's a little more cleaner. But all my other stuff like quizzes and so forth, I typically do those things and handle those things. So what we're going to end up doing today is I'm going to bring up a couple different AI items that you can see or use. And then on top of that, I don't know what everyone use in their home location. For us at we use Blackboard where we're at. We use Blackboard Ultra. And so because of that, we're able to go ahead and mess with kind of items and see things that you can do. And so I'll show some of that too while we're at it. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I'll talk about the main ones that typically we use. All right, so let me pull up the share screen. Screen one, perfect. So what you should be seeing and is really my, oh, but the bar is going to be right in the way. What you should be seeing is my actual ChatGPT. And I use this thing pretty heavily to do a bunch of other things that go with it and so forth. In fact, I have a ton of GPTs, which are different kind of plugins you can use that do specific things that you ask it to. Some of these are ones that we created, like certain chat bots that basically we downloaded a ton of information on. I have assignment my students do this where they may not get access to a coach. So we've downloaded a ton of coaching information as well as coach sayings into a kind of a fake coach. But we do these models that get built, and then therefore they can interview the chat. And it's something we've been playing with and testing with and just having fun do. But that's also where companies are starting to move in that direction, where you're starting to see kind of chatbots take over and you interact with the chatbot the whole time, not a person as they figure out which you need to direct. And the same way we're kind of doing this. It raises a question of where we're going to end up. I know a faculty member who's kind of done that already, where why they have office hours, but when they're not in their office hours, there's a chatbot actively available that students can ask questions to, and it will locate where the information is either in the course or on the syllabus and so forth. It's still a little static because it does more of a search than a full kind of theorized response, but it basically searches, tells where the student where something's at, where they need to go look, and how they can find it. So yes, it's still typically on the syllabus, as most faculty know is a running joke, but realistically, what ends up happening when we talk about kind of what you can put into these things is, you can put in documents, you can put in anything you want. Prompting becomes kind of the key factor. I don't have a lot of what students use ChatGPT for. Like, you know, most people just ask it a question like, um, I had a global health class recently that I taught, and so the refugees was part of the global health crisis discussion. And so we can have ask a question like this. It will search through an active database. But this is how typically most people use it. They're really just using it like Google. And that's not really the best options that exist. Typically, it does a better job because also you don't know if this information is correct. The nice thing is a lot of times now they're providing, citations so you can go see where things are. And this is where it's getting better. But on top of that, the reality is it doesn't do a whole lot in terms of trying to comprehend or understand those kind of things. So for me, typically, I will actually go look for documents produced by the World Health Organization and things like that. And so with those organizations, you end up finding documents. The last one I did on this topic was about 100 and some odd pages long. And with that in mind, what ended up happening was like there's no way for anyone to read that in a given setting. It is huge. And so what ends up happening is, so let's take one of those big, huge documents. So this is the 2020, 2025 WHO Global Strategy on Digital um, Literacy, I think it is. Trying to get the whole title come up. Yeah. But this is going to be too big for my students to read. This is too big for me to read. A lot of times I will skim through a digital health. So this is a global health strategy on digital health. Um, and so what ends up happening is as I go ahead and put the bigger document in, a lot of times I ask it to summarize or highlight the main points. Um, And so with that, what we're getting now is we're moving away from we're just looking for information in general to how does it bring things together and have that kind of conversation of what are the main points to be found in larger documents and moving through information more quickly. So for my students, where they're taking a class where there might be I can give them access, direct access to main documents. It's not me just talking about what's on a slide, what's the main thing. I can give them access, and then they can use that to come back to me, even though I already have the document, I've already done all this kind of stuff in the first place, with kind of what their summations are, what they're learning, how they're going. Because again, this document is huge, actually. Like it's almost 4 MB. So with that being said, they can go through and kind of get the highlight issues. And then when we're talking about things like, hey, this is the main document that's kind of guiding the principles, I want you to talk about issues you could find in it that you think we need to address. This sometimes helps them refine those things. Now, is this the end all be of all things? No. Can I load up about 6 or 7 documents to compare and contrast? Absolutely. Can I upload 20 articles and ask it to create themes from those articles? I can do all that. You know, the key factor here, though, is a lot of times, like for my students, when they design these things and are working with that kind of information, for them, so you can tell it prompts me down here, other things it can do. But for them, that's not where the assignment actually is. That's what they just have to do to start the assignment. AI, like gathering all that information, putting it together, and asking it all to be cited, properly taken care of, doesn't really stop the assignment. What happens then is I ask them usually to design like a presentation, speaker notes. I ask them they have to go through and edit those things. Usually we do a couple rounds of it, so I usually already know what's happening. I can see if AI is being overtly used and the human element's missing, so they're not kind of seeing what takes place. And then I ask them to start designing these things. But at the end of it all, usually not only do they have to do a presentation, a lot of times we might do a defense of the thing they created. The grade is not about just the thing you create. It's a small piece of it because AI is doing a lot of the work. It might be you fully understanding it and responding to questions, moving from what you read into the critical thinking aspect of do you understand it? Can you relate to it? And at this point, they've had plenty of time to come see me, ask questions. We go back and forth and they're like, well, how do I develop this more? Because my goal is for them to develop critical thinking. AI and every research study we've seen lowers critical thinking, but used correctly, you can use it as a tool to force them to do critical thinking because all the easy stuff that they could do to pass by is being done by the AI. And so those are the things that typically we work with and trying to improve. Now, this is just using a general chatbot. You can do this with Gemini, you can do it with Claude, depending which flavor of the month gets an update, depends on what happens. A lot of them also have a lot of neat. I'm going to drop this down a little bit here because I can't. There you go. A lot of them also have other options. Like for us, we do a tracking thing that we have to track data for retention and so forth. And so, like to make it more fun, I have all ours up on a screen. I asked VO, which is part of Gemini, to create me a small 8-second video, and it basically creates a video showcasing like the intro. So. And that then showcases and moves into our data slides that we have. But those are little Javelinas. Javelina is our mascot here. And you can see the prompt right here when I created it. So it's one of those things where there's all these unique things you can do. We actually got high recognition for this. And I'm like, I didn't do any real work. I was up front with that. I was like, all I did was prompt it, then took it and slapped it in front of my PowerPoint. So I appreciate the credit, but like this is not art. So it just looks cool. Again, just because I can make something doesn't make it the end all be all. Now, for students and faculty, what I have found probably the most efficient right now. And 3 years from now, this will absolutely be different because even the stuff we're going to show you right now, some of it had just became available 3 months ago. And that's probably my favorite use, which is under Google. And I'm not going to lie, typically Gemini belongs to Google. If you pay for a Google account and you turn it on to Pro, which is how you have access to the major parts of Gemini, it'll give you access to video, things like that. Pro pretty much will give you, actually, I can show you. So here's my cowboy hat because I'm from Texas. Here's my account, but here's all the things that you can find. Like Pro will open up and give you huge access to vids, photos. You get Google Meets. So if you're used to using your universities like Zoom, you can switch over to using this, so you're not limited. You get access to also Sheets and more room to save on it, as well as all the other things that they create here. And so all these things become you can turn it. I can't stress what Google's doing, but you could essentially turn this entire thing into a workspace that also handles things like your logistics for travel, so forth, forms for doing questionnaires, voice, you can have phone access through it. And so this is all through here. Now, what I'm showing today, just to show today, because we could spend 20 hours talking about all the different things that you can do in Google's workspace, is taking you down to Notebook right here. And so I have my notebook up. It'll open up in the space. If you're already paying for it, you click try Notebook LM. And so Notebook's unique because Notebook has become a way to learn things. And it's been both beneficial to students and faculty. I'm not gonna lie, as a faculty member, I found it amazing. And it's really simple for me as a faculty member. We're gonna walk through what I do, then we can also talk about the benefits for students. For me, what ends up happening as I pull up this right here, sure, we'll go that one, is if I was going to create a new notebook, all I do is create new notebook, open it up. It's this simple. Everything's right here. All I'm going to do is drop in my case, my lecture notes, or if my lecture notes are basically PowerPoints I've created in the past, I would drop those here. I'm going to pick a random document. That should be helpful. This is our presentation I did on trauma-informed management for faculty. All right, and I'll go back to one I've already finished so you guys can see in a minute. So right now, what's happening is it's reviewing the document. It's kind of putting together its own highlights and deals. And so as it's kind of guiding through the document, and you can work on multiple at a time. It's not operating here. It's operating outside typically, unless you just have a really slow computer. But I will also take you through one I've already created. Let's see if it's already popped up because almost there. And this is why I listen to music and all that jazz. So we have it here. It's kind of put together like the little abstract it does usually for all things. It lets you also start. So this is the actual Gemini built into it. Chat, you can write back and forth all you want with it to help better explain, better, interact, make some clarities. All right. But what we do with this is then create different things. And so the example of what I'm going to show you I create, and I'll show you here, but some of the stuff takes a little bit longer, like 5 or 6 minutes to process. So I'll pop back over to the other one is say I want to create, this is I think like a 13, 14 slides. What if I want to create something that's a little bit easier to follow through? So for me, a lot of my students, I'm not gonna lie, this is what I do for my classes. I take my lecture notes, I pop it in here, and then I ask it to give a briefing document. And that briefing document, it starts generating a report. We'll hit the highlight spaces that they can see or do. And so if you're also a student and you're doing other things, you can also have it create depending. And so the suggested format here is based on the document it's reading. So as a faculty member and you're in the administration side, it can create more policy analysis. It can create policies itself from what you're doing, all those things. But from a student standpoint, you can also build a study guide from this. You can do like very highlight takeaways from a small area. And then you can also craft how you want reports done if you have a specific report you want done. Now, why it's doing this usually takes less than a minute, but I'm impatient. So we're going to pop back over to looking at a couple other things. And these are all things that we'll look at in a second. But here's kind of standard things I produce. So this is on a class I teach on disabilities, and we talk about behavior disorders inside of that class. And so for me, I have standard things I put in my Blackboard, hands down. So every time I open up a module or like here's this week, the first things I do is I take my lecture notes now, I put them into Notebook here. I then have certain things I want. One, I want a briefing doc. So I ask it, give me a briefing doc. All right, so this is the briefing doc. It has everything summarized here. Better organized than my lecture notes, I'm not gonna lie, and probably better at emphasizing the key points because I think everything's important. That becomes the issue. So if you go to the studio here and you open this up, all you have to do is you just export them, and you can export to sheets, you can export docs. Let's export to docs so you can see what it looks like. And this is basically, you can then save it as a Word or PDF document, and you can, all you have to do is hit file and save. It's that simple. So download Word or PDF, done. All right, and so then you have this all highlighted, and it works really great at formulating a lot of that information really quickly. Now, second thing I do, if there's key things that I want emphasized, and you can see the documents you add here, I only have one, but you can have multiple documents you add and can control the flow and things to ignore. I actually a lot of times like to make infographics. I don't just make infographics for this. I made infographics of our degree plans 2 weeks ago to make it easier for students to understand the path that they need to follow. And it's fun and pretty and it makes life easier. But a lot of times this will be, is there a major point? This is what it created on its own based on what I was looking for. And now keep in mind, it may not understand what you're asking it to do the first time. So sometimes you have to go back and then ask it to change things or alter things or fix a mistake. And so I have to do that regularly. In fact, I did an item today on Notebook, and it went into left field with what it was doing. So I had to go back and make some edits in my prompting to get it to do what I want to do. You can also, I turn around, usually have a full PowerPoint, and it will produce a PowerPoint. There's different types of background design styles it does. Um, and so we can look through this and see that this is a PowerPoint design from those lecture notes. And usually you prompt it ahead of time. So when we're talking about things like we showed the briefing doc, infographics really just open it up. Oops, didn't mean to do that. And it'll give you options. Do you want it to look like certain ways? Do you want it to have more certain types of visual feel? Things like that. The reason why is because the infographic can also be used for social media. So if you're producing social media, it also works great for that. When it comes to the slide decks, it's kind of the same thing. You can have a very detailed slide deck or presenter slides. I tend to go detailed for things that are going online that my students are going to look at more. But if I was presenting it and most information was coming from me, the talker, kind of like a TED Talk style, it'd be coming from the presenter slides. And then you can also describe other things you want done with the deck and how it happens. And so with that, I then produce a couple other things. So those things are great. They're there. One of the other side effects you can use here, I don't use in my class unless I'm teaching live, is the mind maps. They're amazing because they help break down concepts. But once you open these all up, it only kind of right now sets itself up as a PDF. And so therefore it's really hard to like put on a screen as stationary or put in Blackboard. But when you're working with it, it's extremely interactional. And so I love the interacting factors I can share. But as you can see, if you opened all of them up and you're like, cool, we're gonna put this on screen because it's static, like for students, it's really hard to read. So now the other things I like to do, I've taught online classes forever, but even not talking about online classes, like even with my students, especially like my student athletes who are traveling, I recognize that they're going to miss a lot of class. I also recognize if I sit down and record for an hour and a half, no one listens to it. So what I've started doing is actually using AI to do the thing. And the reason I do that is because it still gives them another option. It's all the information is the same. You have, and don't misunderstand, I have to go through and check all of it, but all the information is the same. It's the lecture notes that get turned into the briefing doc for them, gets turned to the PowerPoint, gets turned to the infograph. And now we're talking about other ways they can learn that is beneficial that they might prefer. And so this is more like it's your preferred learning style. I will say the most successful thing I've had is actually utilizing their audio view, basically to create a podcast. And it will create different types of podcasts depending what you have. You can actually have where two hosts are having a debate. You could have them have a deep talk about the conversation. You can have a brief talk about the conversation, or you can have critique, which is where they're reviewing something that you put up, they're critiquing it. So those are all options. For me, I typically just do the normal deep dive into the topic where they're basically reviewing the document and listening to it. I'll go ahead and play that real quick. So there it is.
A state of chronic disruption across multiple settings that actually sabotages their daily functioning over a long period.
Okay, so it isn't just pushing boundaries. It's a fundamental inability to navigate hierarchical structures without severe friction.
Exactly.
And then we have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD.
And so basically it creates an NPR style podcast. This one's about 20 minutes long. Most of my lectures, it does somewhere between 13 to 22 minutes, depending on how the content's designed that it gets to work with. And the last thing I do, and I didn't at first, but this was a newer feature, students actually ended up really liking it, is you can come up here and do video overviews. Even though they may choose to intake it, I have about a third of the class always watch these because they're always looking for the short version. And so you can pick how you want to format it, how you want to design it. But for that, I'll go ahead and put it up here. And all these you download. I mean, all I have to do for like this podcast is just download, and I'll download the audio and I'll just put it in there. With the, lost it, there we go. The video, same thing, download.
All right, let's talk about something that's a huge challenge in the classroom, behavior disorders. We're going to go on a little journey today. We're talking about behavior that's persistent,
Just skip it ahead a little bit.
and it's severe enough that it seriously gets in the way of a student's life. You know, things like controlling their emotions, making friends, or even just being able to focus and learn in class. And another thing to get our heads around is that behavior disorder isn't just one single.
So with those 5 items, I load them into my Blackboard so students have access to them, they can see them, and they can go ahead and do what they want when they want to create, like, interact with it. The thing I have to remind people though is this isn't to replace you as the expert. You as the expert still needs to check all these things. Now I'll do mine in advance. So a lot of times I'll do what some of my adult students do, which is I'll listen to the podcast I've created. I on my phone. I'll listen to it while I'm doing the dishes or something like vacuuming the house or whatever, folding laundry. I'll watch the video on my phone while doing laundry. And I do that just so I can check all the information, make sure it's fine and that is accurate. Because again, AI does hallucinate or misinterpret. It's not as bad as it was. And then with a document it's solely focusing on, it actually does pretty good. But that can happen. Additionally, you can create quizzes here. It will create quizzes based on your sources and what you're trying to do and what you need for a quiz to do. Additionally, you can have it do data tables if you have data information that are happening, especially things you're putting together. Like if you're trying to put together complex themes and you want to space those out for you, it can do that. Students especially will use some of these quiz items to practice with. I have 2 or 3 students in one of my classes right now who go ahead and purchase with the refund money, Google Access, because there's all that stuff with Google that goes with it. But you also get this, and so they use their quizzes. They'll put their handwritten notes they'll type them up or have them scanned, and then they'll go ahead and load it in here to use for other classes. And they'll just do these things for them. It's a lot easier to put it into a podcast or re-listen to it again, even though they set the original lecture. Now, where do we go from here becomes the kind of the issue. And so what I do, and this is going to depend on your information that you have or things you have access to, is typically I will then go over to like Blackboard and you'll see it here. Now, as long as I have a syllabus around in my lectures, I can make this thing do whatever it wants. I get nervous showing AI on the system stuff because a lot of times you guys may or may not realize what you guys have access to, and everything's different depending if you're using Google, Canvas, etc. But if I was loading information onto this, so let's go ahead and I'll go to one of my other courses that you can see a little bit easier. So my motor learning course, when I drop my syllabus in here, I actually ask it to create modules. So if you're using Blackboard Ultra, which a good chunk of universities are because they bought out everybody, they will do this. They'll scan my syllabus and actually put my modules together right here. And so my modules are all formed by them scanning it in. That we have an 8-week course, so it's read my my schedule, which it did right here. And when you open the syllabus and get down to it, you can clearly see it says 8 weeks. So there we go. And this is kind of what's outlined in that. And so what it did was it go ahead and created those 8 weeks. Now I got to put stuff in there. So what I did was I downloaded each item for each week. So I write week 1 down in a folder. I open up and download each item from Notebook that I was using. So I go straight from the briefing doc, video, etc., and go all the way down. And then we get into seeing these things as we open up. So like week 3, you'll see this is a briefing doc. We're going to talk about this in a second, but you can see the briefing doc comes in here. This is the briefing doc we did for the comprehensive well-being. This is the PowerPoint that came with that. Infograph that we use. Video.
Watch a professional athlete execute a high-speed 5 mile per hour.
And of course, podcast. Now, if you're using Blackboard, one of the advantages are for Blackboard Ultra is you can add things without too much issue. So in this case, I have a weekly quiz, a weekly discussion, and then assignments. And so for the assignments, I still design those. I prefer having a lot more control to make sure everything works out. I sometimes use AI to reformat and frame and do things like that, but I prefer controlling them. So this was reformatted in AI, but it came from an assignment I wrote in Word. The big thing was I had it re-clean up things like the rubric and things like that to make it easier. But with quizzes and discussion, and I know there's discussion that we might see this eventually occur in Canvas as they're doing it, but if you go to create, I can go down to, we're week 3, right? Okay, so let's go to test. Well, I'm doing test or quiz. All right, once we're in here, and I would label this quiz 3, but if I go to this plus button, start adding things in, so I could have built quizzes in Notebook, and I could just drag them over here. Or I can have it auto-generate quizzes for me, and it's going to try to do that for the entire course right now, because that's what it just automatically starts doing. But if I select course items, I go into the content, I go down to week 3, I select onto the briefing doc, which again is the key highlights of all the things I want to talk about. I have select items, let's keep it simple, and you can rate the complexity. Let's go down to mid-level. Well, this grad students, we can go back up. All right, and let's make it 10 questions, keep it simple for 10 points. I could have it just do whatever I want over here. I could do all different types of questions. I could do essay, fill in the blank. Let's keep it simple, do multiple choice. And then it generates those questions. And again, this is AI reading your document and coming up with questions to ask. If you ask any faculty member the issue that they have when it talks about coming up with multiple choice questions, it takes forever, right? Like it's essays easier to do in the front end, longer to do in the back end when you got a grade. Opposite's true of coming up with multiple choice questions because not only the answer you have to come up with, you have to come up with all the wrong answers too. And overall, this has been pretty good for doing those kinds of things. I will say again, you have to read everything. There's a reason you're getting paid. You are the expert. You need to go through all of it and make sure it's correct. But once you do, you can check all those boxes and you just add them to the assessment as you find them. So if I like them all, I'll add all 10 and we're good to go. And that can create my actual my quiz that we utilize. So and make sure it didn't actually go in there so students don't freak out when they see it pop up. All right. With that being said, the discussion works kind of the same way. You can go in here, go to create, you can go to discussion. You can also create journal prompts. You can create AI conversations where you want to focus a topic and the students interact with the AI. I've only played with this a little bit. It's an ongoing thing. We've built kind of our own little chat bots to do this. But when it comes to discussion, you can create auto-generated discussion. So again, you'd pick the course item, go to content, go to week 3 we're on. Let's go down to briefing doc, because again, it's the basis for everything for this. Let's do, as you can see, Bloom's taxonomy utilized here. Let's do analyze, and we'll go ahead and ask it to generate the item. So now the next question comes in, why do all this? And if you're a student, the big question is like, what are faculty actually doing? Well, here's what I'm hoping is happening is all this time-saving time, technique issues, efficiencies, things like this, lets you focus on 2 things more importantly. One, lets you focus on not just the forward front part of it, but more the back part of it, focusing more on the grading, and more importantly, more giving feedback. And then 2, provide more time to meet with students. A lot of this lets me speed up time to meet with students. Like a lot of times this loads, so their classes are, everything's due Sunday for me for my online classes, even my regular classes, everything's due Sunday night to give them the weekend. And then all their stuff opens on Sunday for the next week. A lot of my students, even if we have class on Tuesday or Wednesday, Thursday, wherever in there, a lot of times we'll watch like that 7-minute video before class even starts. So they have the broad view understanding of what's going on. Or they might read the briefing doc all the way through. So we're coming in here, we somehow just randomly flip the classroom, which we've been talking about for 30 years, but at a faster rate. The original idea of flipping the classroom comes from people doing all the work on the front end, like reading the book, things like that. But most students don't read the book, and so letting them choose their modality that they want to interact with and getting the highlights lets them kind of come in knowing what the topic's about and how to interact. And so therefore we start engaging with this and going forward. Discussion, here's an example of essentially discussions you could have. You'd click the one you like, you'd put it up there. I always recommend going through and editing it because the first time I did this, I didn't realize one of these times it asked them to do like 7 things. And what's doing is giving you options to play with. And instead I left it all up there and they were panicking because it was like, this is just a discussion point for 5 points. Why is there 18 things to do? Even if we can use AI, this is going to take forever. And so I didn't catch it till afterwards. And so things like this, where it's like photographic practice setup, and one of the guys like, I didn't know what to do. So like, I just went ahead and did AI version of like a photo. And so it's definitely make sure you read everything thoroughly through. That was just somehow I did not see that part of it. But I think that's what always comes back to it. So, and that lets those things kind of go through. Freeze up on me. With that, though, I do have our students use AI pretty heavily when it comes to understanding those things and what's needed. That's just a cursory view. Really, the sky's the limit. If you're wondering how to use AI more efficiently, you can also ask AI. It's pretty good. The last thing I use a lot for other stuff, a lot of times, is kind of this whole idea of Gamma. And Gamma, for the most part, is basically just a very visual presentation thing. So people who own businesses a lot, do a lot of marketing, I know use Gamma a lot, because what ends up happening is it produces a lot of items, right? And so I have 2 or 3 people in my family who use Gamma, my Gamma account, as we go through this stuff. So a great example could be, this was a marketing scheme used. And so this was posted on Instagram, and it went through the process of just going up and walking through, from a mental health side, things that you can do to kind of get get prepared for the holidays and sometimes having issues with family and boundaries and so forth. For me, I had a presentation today, and after I did the presentation, which didn't have slides, it was just me talking because its main focus was on data. Someone's like, "Hey, can you put that information into a, like kind of a visual representation to hand out real quick?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." And so I put it up there. And so I quickly switched into this. I printed this out as a PDF later. I put my information in my Word document here, listing the percentages and things we had going on, what's occurring. We did SWOT analysis that's kind of built in here too, and all those things. And so, it provides those options. But this is more of a visual way to do things. This and Canva are probably the two most used in this aspect of it. But it's just different ways we do those things. So with that being said, that kind of concludes most of the things I have going on when it comes to these. So questions you might have. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to me if you need to ask questions on how to use AI. The biggest thing I think I have with AI is most of the major companies haven't yet adapted. They're not forced to. That's why it's not federal law across all 50 states at the moment that's enforced to be accessible online. But there's mismatched issues. The DOJ has a statement out. There's a lot going on with that right now. But because of that, you end up having the fact that most companies are not pushing it. So when you look back at, let's see if it's closed down, you'll notice that what we have for Blackboard Ally, where it can evaluate accessibility, it does not at all have the accessibility listed out when it comes to being very accessible to screen readers. And so you have to go back and consider that. So I oftentimes might have two PowerPoints. I have the PowerPoint it created, and then I take that PowerPoint and I strip it down to just a white background and lettering. But they haven't built the AI tools to just go ahead and automatically add alt tags and do that stuff. They're getting there, and I talked to a couple people I know who are working on it, but it's not there at the moment yet. And it's one of those things that we suspect will end up happening. Especially since there is a DOJ ruling that's moving forward from the Department of Justice. But it's one of those things where until that time, you have to be mindful of what's accessible and what's not and make those changes. And they're not very hard to do to provide both options, but they do have to be done. I think that's better for our situation as educators. In the case where I teach a class with disabilities, obviously that's one thing that I have to reconsider every time I post stuff, go back and then alter them. So without any other questions, you can reach out to me at daniel.burt, which is BURT for the last one, at tamuk.edu. And I will gladly answer any questions people send my way. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Burt. That was very informative. I got my wheels spinning on ways I can definitely improve my courses and my online delivery as well. Anyone else have any questions for Dr. Burt before we close? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.